She called me old lady in front of everyone, threw the bill right at me, and said, "Come here and pay it." The waiter froze. My son looked down and I just smiled because sometimes silence is louder than any slap. I didn't argue, I didn't explain. I just reached for my purse and decided that day I would pay the last bill I ever would for their disrespect. Tell me in the comments, would you have walked away that day or stayed quiet like I did? Tap like if you believe that one day karma always comes home. Subscribe for more stories where silence becomes power and heartbreak becomes a plan. That night I learned what true pain feels like, not when strangers insult you, but when your own family watches it happen and says nothing. My son, my only child, the same boy I carried through every storm of my life, just sat there, eyes down, not a word. His wife grinned, proud, superior, dripping with the arrogance of someone who thought age meant weakness. "Maybe next time you'll bring your purse, old lady," she whispered. Everyone at the table heard. The waiter looked embarrassed for me, but I stayed calm because when people show you their character, you don't interrupt, you memorize. And that night I memorized everything: the tone of her voice, the silence of my son, and the way my dignity refused to break. The next morning, I didn't cry, I made tea. And then I called my lawyer, had known my husband for years, the man who once said, "If they ever forget your worth, let your paperwork remind." Then we sat across from each other for nearly an hour. Hadn't asked for details, my silence said it. Ali said, "It's time for an update." We changed everything. The house gone from their names, the savings moved, the land transferred, half went to the orphanage I'd supported quietly for years, the rest into a trust for my grandchildren because they still had time to learn what their parents forgot: respect. I walked out of that office lighter, not angry, not bitter, just free, because true revenge doesn't scream at signs. 2 weeks later, she called, her tone suddenly sweet. "Mom, we've been meaning to invite you for dinner. It's been too long." I almost laughed, but instead I said yes. That night I wore the same dress I'd worn to the restaurant, a quiet reminder of the day she tried to humiliate me. The table was beautifully set. She poured the wine, pretending nothing had ever happened. Fake smiles, fake warmth. Then my son cleared his throat and said, "Mom, we've been talking about the house papers. Maybe it's time to sort it out." Their hand rested proudly on his arm, as if shed already won, but shouldn't notice the small envelope I placed between the salt and pepper shakers. "Go ahead," I said softly. "Since we're talking about the house, you might want to read that first." Her laughter died halfway through the first line. "To whom it may concern, all assets have been transferred under a new will effective immediately." Her face turned pale, my son's fork dropped, and I just smiled, the same calm smile I wore the day she called me old lady. "You told me to pay the bill that day," I said quietly. "I did, with your future." The silence at that table felt heavier than any insult I'd ever heard. My son's eyes filled with shame. She tried to speak, but for the first time words failed. Harry looked at them both and said, "Respect costs nothing, but once you lose it, you can't buy it." Back that night, I went home to my little room, the one they thought was beneath me. I made tea, sat by the window, and for the first time in months, I slept peacefully because revenge hadn't come from anger. It came from clarity, from remembering that love without respect isn't love at all. They took my peace for weakness, but I rebuilt my peace into power. And now when I pass that restaurant, I smile, not because I won, but because I finally stopped trying to belong where I was never valued. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been disrespected by someone you once called family? Tap like if you believe no parent deserves humiliation. Subscribe for more stories where silence becomes justice and pain becomes power. Share this video with someone who needs to remember you didn't have to fight for respect. You just have to walk away and let your dignity finish the story, because sometimes the strongest voice is the one that signs, not shouts.